We were very fortunate yesterday to, for the first time, have Johnny Buggs from the Home Office. He was passionate about the role of equality and diversity in the fire service.
So I'm Johnny Bugg, I'm Head of Fire Strategy and Reform Unit at the Home Office, and this is my first time at the AFSA conference, which was a great chance to talk to delegates about the seriousness with which the Home Office takes the diversity and inclusion agenda, the importance of joint partnership work with AFSA, with the fire chiefs, with the sector at large to try and support the drive for reform and change in this vital area. My presentation presented a range of the key data that we now know about diversity and inclusion in fire and rescue services, and drew parallels to other sectors like policing and to the wider government race disparity audit to look at how transparency can be a powerful tool in improving diversity and creating an inclusive environment where all of the community feels they have a role to play. It was great to take questions. It's the first time I've spoken with AFSA, but it's not the first conversation that we've had with them as an organisation. My team are meeting with AFSA leads later in the year to talk about how we can work together and to develop policy that works for the sector.
I'm really pleased that the second speaker, Karen Lees, was able to attend. She was the first Shadow Minister for Fire to attend one of our conferences, and it's a model that we'll keep for the future, because this gives us a perspective of what the policies are for the opposition, and clearly many of the policies she put on the table, such as more resources for fire service, more firefighters, a real focus on prevention in the future, is something that we can totally tie into and we can support.
Diversity is not an optional extra.
My name's Karen Lee, I'm the MP for Lincoln and I'm Labour's Shadow Minister for Fire and Emergency Services. My central message today was that equality and diversity shouldn't be an add-on, it should be something that runs right through the heart of all of our public services, and it should reach out into all areas of those public services, and it should underpin everything that we do. I also had three key messages for me. The session that I've just been to was doing more for less. I don't think that you can do more for less. For me, we need a fully resourced, adequately resourced fire service. We need a robust regulatory framework, and we need a workforce which is both diverse and properly paid. It's always important to have organisations which are lobbying and to get that message out there, because there's obviously a problem if the representation within communities within the fire service is 10% less than it is in our communities. We clearly need to look at that and manage that so that we bring that representation up. So to have a group like AFSA is absolutely vital. I think it's about looking how we can increase that representation, and it's for them to go away and look at that. People talk about carrot and stick. I'm not certain that stick really works. For me, it's got to be more about carrot. But that we surely must need things like in the Labour Party, we've got all women shortlists. Maybe we need to look at ways at which we can increase the recruitment of people from different BAME backgrounds so that we bring that up, because clearly what we've done already hasn't worked.
So I'm grateful to AFSA for asking me to share some of these experiences with you today. But first of all, I'm going to go back to basics, because nothing is as it seems.
My name is Sabrina Cohen-Hatton and I'm a Deputy Chief Fire Officer. And there were two messages for me, really, at this conference. And the first one is, don't be afraid to be different. I think it's fair to say that there's a pretty strong stereotype around what a firefighter looks like. And the reality is the qualities you need to be a good firefighter aren't determined by the box you come in or the way you look. But what I do know is that when many people think about their idea of a firefighter, it doesn't look like me. And in many respects, not being constrained by that stereotype has been incredibly freeing. And I've been able to do things that are way outside the stereotype. So don't be afraid to be different. It's good if you're different. And I think the other message for me is be brave. And being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid of doing something. Being brave means doing something despite being afraid. And when I talked about my experiences of being homeless, I was terrified that people would judge me for it. But actually, by being brave, I've been able to talk to other people who are in the same space now as I was back then and say that you do matter and your circumstances don't define you. They don't determine where you end up. only where you start from. So don't be afraid to be different and be brave. So with the book, I've tried to take what we've learned over the last 2 decades of firefighting and decades of psychological research and tried to take what we've learned from those heat of the moment decisions and apply them to all walks of life. And I hope that people will be able to take from the book a better understanding of themselves and how their brain works, particularly under pressure. But much more than that, I hope that they'll be able to see the human side of firefighting as well, not just the superhuman facade.
This police officer.
One day I had an incident that absolutely changed the course of my career. And my husband and I, before we were married, were both firefighters together on neighbouring stations. And one day I was called to an incident where a firefighter had been severely burned. He was on that other truck and there was a 1 in 4 chance it was him. Now, I was really lucky I had a reprieve that day, and it wasn't him that was injured, but it was our friend. And I felt this overwhelming sense of relief when we got there that it wasn't him. But then I felt so incredibly guilty because I felt like by not wanting it to be him, I'd wished it on our friend. And I struggled with that for some years. I didn't speak about it because I thought people would think I was weak or that I couldn't cope. But it niggled away at me so badly that I knew I had to do something about it. And rather than speak about it, which I know now I really should have done, I started to look at what we could do to stop something like that happening again. And what I discovered really shocked me. 80% of injuries across all industries result from human error. That's phenomenal. That's not a problem with a piece of equipment or a flawed policy, but a human mistake, which would mean people would get hurt. And that's when I started to look at risk-critical decision-making and how we can improve that to reduce human error and stop firefighters in particular from getting hurt. So I started my research nearly a decade ago now, if you go from start to finish, and we've been working with commanders all over the UK, looking at how people make decisions at incidents, at real-life incidents, in those real heat-of-the-moment decisions. And we found some really interesting things, and we know that the majority of decisions our commanders make are gut decisions, intuitive decisions, not analytical decisions. So we changed our national policy through national operational guidance to reflect that and develop some techniques to help commanders to make better decisions to reduce human error and keep firefighters safer. So that's now in the national operational guidance, but more than that, we've shared it with other emergency services, and those techniques are now included in JESSOP, and we've shared it beyond international borders as well. And for me, the best thing about this is I think our biggest achievements are going to be incidents that we never hear about because they don't happen, because someone hasn't been hurt, and that's something I take comfort in.
Just let's start off with appraisal. So I guess most of you will have an annual appraisal.
Good morning, my name's Tony Vickers-Byrne. I'm the Chief Advisor for HR Practice at the CIPD, and I specialise in particular on diversity and inclusion, on employee well-being and employee recognition, and so much, they're just so intertwined, these 3 areas, and they're real key priorities for the CIPD. I was really pleased to be here this morning talking to this really large audience and just stressing how important the CIPD is about the issues of ensuring every workplace is fair, it's inclusive, it's safe and it's supportive. All of our research shows just how important people management is for productivity and the well-being of all of our staff. And we need to ensure that managers see as their key priority the health and well-being of all of their employees. And you know, we see stats which show that 1/4 of organisations won't employ people with a disability. We see stats that say that only 50% of line managers have as a priority the well-being of their staff. So we've made real progress, I think, about putting the human at the centre of business, but there's still so much more to be done. And it's great to be able to come along to a conference like this and to be able to share those messages and also to feel real empathy from the audience themselves. I think it's really, really important that organisations like AFSA are really high profile and are able to give voice to concerns which may not be apparent to other parts of the organisation. you know, I describe myself as being an expert on 59-year-old, half English, half Irish, balding, white guys. Yeah, I'm a real expert on their needs, but I want to surround myself with experts from different communities, from different protected characteristics, so that they can say what are the key issues affecting their members, the things that work well, the things where we need to do improvement. And you know, an organisation like this can have a really great voice to ensure that those messages come through.
Additional benefits. So it's always worth thinking about. But the senior officers out there, if you are thinking about whether you can release people to work for and with AFSA, please do. It's really definitely worth it.
I'm Andy Bowers, Deputy Chief Fire Officer of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. We're proud to be the hosts for this year's AFSA Spring Conference. So our service has got a long association with AFSA. Dal Rye, who works for us, is recently elected yesterday as the new chair of AFSA. We've been long supporting, and we've held this conference before as hosts, so we are pleased to be able to do so again. So these events are important because they focus people's minds, they make us think about diversity of thought, and delivering a better service to the public, which is why we're here. Previous conferences have always made us stop and think about how we can do things differently, how we can do things better. We've always taken things away about how we can make improvements, and we're hoping for even more this year. At this conference there's going to be a range of speakers talking about our people, talking about how we can improve things in the service, how we can improve diversity, how we can focus on it being the right thing to do to deliver a better service to our communities. Some really great speakers, some really great workshops throughout the 2 days, and I'm hoping everyone will get a lot out of it. This has got people from outside the service as well, although there will be many fire and rescue services represented, but we've got outside sponsors, we've got companies that are involved in fire and rescue services, and supporters from every walk of life.
Zoe Billingham, and I'm Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary Fire and Rescue, and I was asked to come to this great conference to talk about some of the findings of the Inspectorate in the first tranche of inspections, but also to talk specifically around what we found in terms of how the Fire and Rescue Service looks after its people. And I posed some challenges to the workshop to ask them what the issues are in enabling a fire and rescue service to become more representative of the communities it serves. And we talked about a whole range of things, from all of the positive action that fire and rescue services are taking, all the way through to the various barriers to an inclusive and engaging and welcoming organisation. And I had some feedback and challenge to me as HMIC, FRS as well, some challenges from people in the workshop about what more we as an inspectorate can do to make sure that we're landing really very clear messages about the need to improve not just diversity and inclusion within the whole of the workforce, but also that diversity and inclusion of approach in all of that frontline, outward-facing services as well. So I found it a really invigorating session and enjoyed every minute of it. So AFSA and these sorts of conferences are really important in terms of, for us as the Inspectorate, really understanding what the correct questions are that we need to ask of fire and rescue services that will promote and drive improvement. But particularly today, I wanted to find out from your delegates examples of where fire and rescue services have really dealt with the fact that their workforce does not represent the communities that they serve, and have been able to make great changes in the way in which they encourage people into the organisation, but really importantly also retain people within the organisation who are from different communities. And I asked a whole range of different questions around why some services are successful and maybe others aren't. And we ended up talking a lot about what is the culture of the organisation. What does that culture look and feel like? Is that culture a culture that is enabling and welcoming of people? Or is it a culture that tends not to appreciate difference? And why is that? And I think the fire and rescue services are on a very long journey. The people part of the inspection that we've done is the least positive by a very long way of the areas we've looked at. And as I said today in my small presentation, it's absolutely fundamentally vital that Fire and Rescue Service have their people, their workforce up front and central, and are working with them, engaging with them and treating them in the way necessary to provide an excellent public service.
How I got here and some of the things I've learned on the way. There's a little biography in there that you may or may not have read. I'm a Londoner.
Hi, I'm Matt Parr. I'm Her Majesty's Inspector of Fire and Rescue Services. I cover London and the South Central area. Well, I've had a great morning down at the conference this morning. I told a story of my progress through the Navy and then into the Inspectorate, the changes that have happened over the years, how different it felt at the start of my career to how it feels now. And I think if there was one message I had, it would be that it's all very well organisations having policies and vision statements, but it's how they treat individuals that counts. And whether it's black, Asian, male or female, whatever it is, everyone's different, even if they look the same. And you have to think really hard about how things feel to other people. Well, I think that, I've really enjoyed going from the Navy to inspecting fire and rescue services and police. And I think the real reason, there are differences, but fundamentally you've got similar people in them. You've got people who aren't motivated solely by money, they're not selfish, they want to be part of a team, they want to get out of bed every morning thinking they're doing something that matters and something that's in the public interest. So yeah, there are differences, and I talked a little bit about, I think the Navy's got less of a blame culture than police and fire sometimes, and I think both police and fire, both the Navy and fire really care about training. I sometimes don't think that feels the same way about the police, but I think fundamentally where they're similar as organisations is they're hierarchical, they've struggled to be diverse, they've approached it in different ways, and the key for all of them is just, I think they've got to think so hard about how individual decisions feel to individual people. It's not about big policies, they're important, but it's the individual decisions about people that count. We ask some pretty searching questions about diversity. What we're not doing is marking fire and rescue services for targets and how many people, how many women they've got, how many BAME people they've got. We're not. We're aware of that, but we're not judging them on that. What we're judging them on is whether the culture of the organisation gives them the best chance of achieving greater diversity. Are people welcomed? Does the culture feel right? Are they trying to do the right things? Are they being imaginative about their recruiting and promotion efforts? We're not setting targets, but we're asking some pretty searching questions. And for those services that haven't got good answers to them, we're being critical. AFSA, I'll be honest, I wish AFSA didn't have to exist. I'd love to be part of organisations. There was no need for staff organisations like this, where people simply didn't feel the need to have them. I think you know what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I think it's a good thing, but where we should all be aiming is that to a position where, in this case particularly, Asian members of fire and rescue services are so confident that they're properly represented, properly integrated, properly promoted, properly cared for, that they don't feel the need to have the organisation. We're going to be years and years and years from now. We may never get there, and in the meantime I think organisations like this are fantastic. I don't know that much about AFSA, but for example, some of the work that the Black Police Association has done has been profoundly important in promoting people's understanding of what needs to be got right. So yeah, on the one hand, you see my point that it would be nice not to have it, but boy, we absolutely do at the moment, and they do great work.
Gary Collins, Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service, back here for another year for the AFSA conference. Great to be here, and actually heartwarming to see that everyone reunites and connects as a family. And that's a great foundation for learning, organisational development and success. So pleasure to be part of it and enjoying the day. Thank you.